Hello, I'm Waqar Rizvi, and this is Scope. On today's show, we'll discuss the U.S. observation post being set up on the Turkey-Syria border and how the issue of Gibraltar is turning into a Brexit headache. The United States says its observation post will secure the Turkish border from threats it faces from across the border in Syria. America also wants clashes between Turkish and Syrian Kurdish forces it supports to end. Will Syria, Russia, Turkey, and Iran buy this reasoning? Let's discuss this further. We're now joined by Gonca Şenay, who is the TRT World Ankara Bureau Chief. Gonca, thanks for joining us here in the Scope. What do you know so far, Gonca, about the Turkish point of view on these observation posts?
It's been a couple of days since we heard about these observation posts. There were no signals until then. We know that just a couple of days ago again, Turkish Foreign Minister Mevlut Çavuşoğlu was in the U.S. to attend some meetings, and he met with U.S. Secretary of State Pompeo there. And what we heard from Çavuşoğlu afterwards, just yesterday, he was a guest to, and he gave an interview to a Turkish local broadcaster, and he said he mentioned YPG. YPG was again a talking point between him and Pompeo in the meeting which was held in U.S. Well, let me first remind what YPG is according to Turkey. YPG is the Syrian affiliate of the terrorist organization PKK. PKK has taken lives of nearly 40,000 people in Turkey. They are a terrorist group according to Turkey, but not only according to Turkey. Many countries in the world consider PKK as a terrorist organization. YPG is the Syrian affiliate of PKK. But the United States has been cooperating under the name of the fight against Daesh in Syria. It has been cooperating with YPG. And this has been a problem between two countries for the last couple of days. So Çavuşoğlu says he mentioned this. He mentioned that Turkey doesn't want YPG in its border to Pompeo again. And he has given this message clearly again. He said YPG is a threat to Turkey. And he said, I'm quoting from Çavuşoğlu, he said to Pompeo, you say this group is under your control, and how come they attack on us repeatedly in the last years? There has been YPG attacks in Turkey's capitals also. He mentioned this to Pompeo, but he says this was a surprise that this announcement of the observation posts came right after their meeting. Now, Turkey is questioning this. Çavuşoğlu also said this. Turkey is questioning whether the U.S. is doing this to protect YPG. And Turkey says this won't benefit either YPG or U.S. Because Turkey is very decisive to clear its borders from this terrorist organization, whether they are cooperating with one of the strongest countries of the world or not. Turkey has given this message lately for the last months, especially after this Operation Olive Branch, that they are decisive not only to clean YPG from Manbij, but also to clear the eastern Euphrates from Manbij. So these observation posts are to protect YPG, to stop Turkey from another cross-border operation. Turkey will do whatever is needed. We have heard this from Turkish Foreign Minister too, and there will be a cross-border operation no matter what U.S. does or not.
Right. It's interesting, Gonca, because the narrative by the United States, as you well know, is that this decision was made in cooperation with Turkey. I believe that those are the terms that Mattis used when he spoke about this, or it may have been another U.S. official. Correct me if I'm wrong. But it's interesting, isn't it, that the topic that was mentioned when it came to the observation posts and the way it's been sold to the media and others is that the United States is doing this out of the kindness of its heart to protect Turkey from Daesh or ISIS. Do you believe that the Turks will buy that argument?
I don't think so. When it is about YPG, which is a terrorist organization, Turkey will not buy it. Turkey wants to clear YPG, not only from its borders, I said from its borders, but initially it's to clean YPG from its borders, but also Turkey wants to clear YPG from Syria. Turkey even wants to clear its border with Iraq from PKK and YPG also. So Turkey will not buy this. I'm sure there will be some talks with Turkey and the US. Remember the Manbij deal, which was made in mid-2018. It had a deadline. There were problems between two countries, but it's kind of working now, although it's very slow and although the deadline has been missed a couple of times. It's been working. Manbij deal was again to clean YPG from Manbij, because YPG isn't only a threat for Turkey, but it's also a threat for the Arabs and Kurds who are living in Syria. Many people had to move out of where they live because of the threats from YPG, because of their pressure. They changed the demographics of the region. It's a violent group. I mean, Turkey will not buy this. This is what I'm sure about.
You know, Gonca, as you well know, Ankara has carried out 2 operations against these Kurdish forces in Syria since 2016. Do you believe, is it possible that there will be more operations against this group, or will this move by the United States discourage Turkey from carrying out any more operations?
Well, the first operation was a fight against Daesh. The Operation Olive Branch was just targeting to clear YPG. A third operation, we have been talking about this, but it has some conditions, of course. Turkish president repeatedly has given this message, and not only the president, the ministers, the chief of staff, general chief of staff, they have given this message. Tel Rifat, Ain el Arab, they have to be cleaned from YPG. So Turkey can do an operation, but of course there are conditions. Of course there are some other countries Turkey needs to talk to. They have to agree on some conditions, but we'll see. I mean, Turkey has been giving this message for the last month, even before the Operation Olive Branch, or even before the operation to Afrin. Turkey has given this message. Turkey is very clear about YPG, as it's very clear about PKK too. Turkey doesn't want YPG in its borders initially, but Turkey doesn't want YPG to operate in Syria, in whatever their name is, SDF, or there are some other names they have been using in Syria, or even in Iraq, even in Sinjar, they are using some different names. It doesn't matter. They are a violent group and they have committed crimes. They have there have been terrorist attacks to Turkey from this group. So Turkey is clear. I can't say when this operation will take place, but Turkey has been discussing this in every level in its national security councils, this threat, and how can this be done, who they should talk to, its conditions. Of course, they are very important. Syria is now very fragile, we know, but what is clear is YPG is a terrorist organization to Turkey, and Turkey will do whatever is needed to clean YPG from Syria.
And what complicates this further, Gonca, is the fact that the United States, of course, supports many of these forces that as you said, Turkey sees as terrorists. How do these two countries, or will these two countries, do you think, be able to come to some sort of an understanding about that? Because the U.S. has already made its decision vis-a-vis these observation posts. I imagine Turkey will not, attack these posts, obviously. I imagine that the Turks will, of course, register a protest against them, as they seemingly already may have behind the scenes. What do you think will happen, though, vis-a-vis this group and the fact that the Americans continue supporting it?
Well, what Çavuşoğlu said yesterday about this, there was a question just like this, and he said Turkey doesn't want any confrontation between Turkish and American troops in Syria. So let's keep this in mind. Talks between two countries will be very important from now on, as it was very important in the last year also. There have been many problems between two countries. The messages weren't clear. What U.S. said, they didn't keep their promises to Turkey. They have given many promises, but they didn't keep many of them too. But the Manbij deal was the turning point. The Manbij isn't still cleared from YPG either, but there's a lot of progress. The Turkish and U.S. soldiers have been patrolling the area. Now there are joint patrols, which we were expecting to see, because that means something that the US and Turkey are cooperating better than the previous months. There has been cooperation. Talks will be very important from now on, as it was in the previous months. But we'll see. I mean, the US says something, Turkey says something. They'll try to come to a point in the very near future. This has to be in the very near future. Let me underline that lastly, because Turkey doesn't have any tolerance to YPG anymore.
Okay, so let's talk about Turkey as a whole, with its relationship with the other players in Syria. Of course, we have the Assad government in Damascus. We have the Russians, of course, who are in Syria as well. We have the Iranians also. We've already spoken about the Americans. What is the current status, do you think, of the Turkish relationship vis-a-vis those three other countries that I mentioned? We know that obviously Turkey, there was not a change of heart, but there was a reform or a difference in its strategy towards Syria at some point in time over the past few years. Is that still the case, and what does that mean then for Turkish involvement in Syria as a whole?
Well, after Russia came to the field as an active player, things changed in Syria. But now Turkey is underlining that a political solution is a must. All these parties, Turkey, Russia, and Iran, have been conducting these Astana meetings, which aims to build a political solution in Syria, a new constitution. We're talking about a constitutional committee now. On 28th and 29th, there will be another Astana meeting, which Turkey, Russia, and Iran are on the table, are around the table, and they're talking about a political solution. If we see something, if we a concrete step forward, the constitutional committee, it will change a lot in the field. We'll see. These couple of days will be important. On 28th and 29th, all technical committees and from all countries, they will be talking. Turkey is trying to strengthen this political solution efforts. Turkish president met with the German leader, with the German leader Merkel and French leader Macron a few weeks ago in Istanbul. It was an important meeting. They underlined the importance of the political solution, and they even said the constitutional committee should be built until the end of this year, which we have just five weeks left. So we will see some progress in this political solution efforts. That will mean something different for Syria. The minister is leaving. Maybe he would want to do something different. He would just want to leave his signature to this process, because he's worked a lot and it's been a tiring process for him too. This Astana meeting, after this Astana meeting, if we hear that the candidates or the members of this constitution, if we hear a call from the United Nations for a meeting at Geneva to talk about this constitutional committee, then it will mean something and it will change things. Turkey and Russia has reached a deal about Idlib, and it's been working. There has been no clashes since then, after the deal in Sochi. So we'll see. Just this couple of weeks will be important for these two or three partners, let me say. It will be important for them too. And it will have an effect on Turkey-US relations on Syria too. If there is a political solution upcoming, it can't be too close, or it may not be too close, but it will mean something. And if we're talking about a political solution, then the military, these military movements, these military solutions would be something that we'll talk later on, or maybe even we would forget to talk about these if a political solution possibility gets stronger.
Gonca, just before letting you, I wanted to get a short answer from you on one thing which just came to my mind. Do you believe possibly that this move by the United States when it comes to these observation posts is, in a sense, an American attempt to remain involved vis-a-vis Syria? Because we know that in Astana, the Americans are not around the table directly. Do you think that this is an American attempt possibly to still have some influence about possibly how Turkey acts and, of course, what happens in Syria?
Well, it might be. Why not? All the strongest countries of the region are around the table. Turkey, Russia, and Iran. US, which is 1,000 kilometers away from this country. Turkey, for example, has a border more than 900 kilometers long, has a border, and it's been affected from this war. Russia is a key actor, has been a key actor in this Syrian crisis. Iran is a different and strong actor. So why not? US always, they want to be a part of the developments in the Middle East, but we'll see what happens.
Very well, Gonca. We, of course, appreciate you taking your time out to share your thoughts with us in the scope. That was Gonca Shinai, TRT World Ankara's Bureau Chief, and joining us live there via Skype. We now have joining us Dr. Bassam Abu Abdullah, who is Professor of International Relations, and he's joining us now on the line from Damascus in Syria. Dr. Abdullah, thank you for joining us here on the scope. Dr. Abu Abdullah, I'm wondering, what do you make of these U.S. observation posts which the U.S. has said it will set up on the Turkey-Syria border?
Please, again, your question, I couldn't understand very well.
Sure,
please.
Sure. What do you think of the U.S. setting up these observation posts on the Turkey-Syria border?
First of all, I want to explain the American situation in Syria. First of all, the American forces in Syria is occupators. Americans are occupators. This is first. Secondly, I think they have no right to be in Syria without a permission from Syrian government or to have an international resolution from UN Security Council. The third, that we have heard different statements from American administration, especially during the Trump administration. Sometimes they are talking that, especially President Trump, he is talking about withdrawing from Syria, the American troops. Secondly, they are talking about fighting against ISIS. Then they are talking about that they will not withdraw from Syria until the political settlement is realized. And at the same time, they are connecting their presence in Syria with the Iranian presence, which is a legal one, while the American is not legal. So we are in front of not stable American position for their goals in Syria. At the same time, we are seeing that American presence is connecting to the borders between Syria, Jordan, and Iraq, and they don't want to see Iran on the Mediterranean Sea, not because of American interests, but because of Israeli concerns about that. So I think we have not a stable American position. I think 2 days ago, Mr. James Jeffrey, who is representative of the United States or the envoy of President Trump for engagement in Syria, he talked to a Novosti news agency, the Russian one, that they are not looking to change the regime in Syria or to change President Assad, but they want Iranian to withdraw from Syria. And he talked about other targets. So we are in front not a stable American, and there is no trust in American policy generally in Syria, and we come to
But Dr. Bassam, if I may interrupt you, Dr. Bassam, if you allow me, because the Americans say, Dr. Bassam, that their involvement right now in Syria is to defeat Daesh or ISIS. Do you not believe them?
No. I think that what we saw now in Syria on the borders, especially in the northeast of Syria, especially in the countryside of Deir ez-Zor, we see that American they are making recruitment of ISIS members. They are training them in a Rokban camp, which is on Al-Tanaf point on the border between Syria, Jordan, and Iraq, and we could see that in the Suwaida city in the south of Syria. We now are seeing that either not Syrian only, Iraqi, they are talking about that American is trying to recruit the ISIS members and moving them on the borders between Syria and Iraq, because American is openly talking that they don't want to leave this corridor between Iran, Iraq, and Syria. It's not only for security reasons. I think because of economic reasons, because if this corridor will be opened from Syria to Iraq, to Iran, to Pakistan or Afghanistan, it means that China, with its big project, the Silk Road project, it will be on the Mediterranean Sea. So they are trying to cut either the Chinese ambitious to be on the Mediterranean Sea through being on these borders and through using ISIS members all the time to make these borders between Syria and Iraq not stable one. So this is one of the American targets. At the same time, they don't want to see Iran on the Mediterranean Sea, not because of what they are talking about, transferring weapons or other reasons, because of the economic reasons, which we should, this is the main reason for United States.
Dr. Bassam, if you allow me to come in, because you mentioned the economic reasons, but there's another thing that the Americans say, another aspect that the Americans talk about, and others who are involved in Syria on that side, on the side that is anti-Bashar al-Assad, they say that there are human rights concerns about what the Syrian government, what the Iranian government, what the Russians have done in Syria. How do you respond to those accusations of human rights violations?
For the human rights violation, I think the United States, the last country who can talk about human rights, because we could see human rights in the last events concerning the Jamal Khashoggi killing in the Saudi consulate in Istanbul. And we can see that the American position is changing when it's connecting to Saudi Arabia or its allies generally, or when it's concerning to the Israeli policies towards Palestinian people, or when it's concerning the killing of Yemeni people in general. So this is, we are not against human rights, absolutely, and we are supporting all kinds of freedoms and political dialogue in Syria. Generally, I'm not against any kind of opposition, but we are. I am thinking that the United States is using this slogan as to cover the real targets of United States policies. The history of the United States is full of these contradictions between their talks about human rights and the real policies on the ground. And the last event concerning Jamal Khashoggi or the Yemeni issue or Palestinian issue is a big example. So I don't think they are interested in that. Absolutely. America is looking for its interest, for money, for oil, for resources. Human rights is only a slogan for covering the real targets of the United States. In the region, in the Middle East, the main targets for the United States is the oil resources,
right?
To compete the others like Russia and China, and the most important is Israel.
Okay, so Dr. Bassam, stay with us. We're just going to go for a very short break, and we'll be back with you and another guest. Dr. Bassam there mentioned something very important, talking about American interests. What are those American interests, and how is America trying to fulfill those interests, possibly through these observation posts, which it is setting up on the Turkey-Syria border? We'll discuss this a lot more after this break. Stay tuned. Thank you for staying with us. We're continuing to discuss these U.S. observation posts, which are to be set up on the Turkey-Syria border. We have joining us Dr. Bassam Abu Abdullah, who is a professor of international relations. He's joining us from Damascus and is still with us. We're now joined also by Yusuf Erim, who is a journalist at TRT, and he's joining us live now from Istanbul. Yusuf, thank you for joining us. Yusuf, we've been discussing, of course, these observation posts as they've been set up and the Turkish point of view on all of this. What do you think the American agenda here is by setting up these observation posts?
Well, when we look at Secretary of Defense James Mattis's statement, he specifically touches on that Turkey's security concerns are going to be addressed with these observation posts, and that that the U.S. will try to stop or report any suspicious activity towards the Turkish border to the Turks. But from a Turkish point of view, Turkey is more than well equipped to take care of its border, as it has done in Operation Euphrates Shield, as it's done in Operation Olive Branch, and the many other cross-border operations that it's successfully carried out in Iraq and Syria against the PKK and YPG. So many of the Turks view these observation posts, rather than containing what's in Syria, the danger in Syria that's trying to penetrate it into Turkey. Not in that standpoint. They view it more as keeping Turkey out of Syria along an area where that's of great interest to Turkey for its national security. And many people don't view America's stance on this matter as genuine, and they view it as serving American interests and not actually taking Turkey's security concerns at heart at all.
Yusuf, as you well know, the Syrian government, that is the government of Bashar al-Assad, would say that any Turkish involvement in Syria is not welcome, even vis-a-vis the YPG or otherwise. How do you think Turkey would respond to that?
Well, Turkey would respond to it as Turkey has been invited to Syria, maybe not by the Bashar al-Assad regime, but they've been invited by the 3.5 million Syrians that at the moment call Turkey home, the refugees that have escaped the Assad regime's terroristic actions. Also, the close to 5-6 million Syrians that live in Turkish-influenced areas, whether it be Afrin, Idlib, or the Euphrates Shield area. We're talking close to, Turkey provides security right now to close to 10 million Syrians almost. We're talking about 25-30% of the country. Turkey doesn't need an invitation from the Assad regime to come in. If another country is securing 25% of your population, they have an invitation to come in. And they have an invitation to secure these people, especially when it's on their border, and especially when terrorist movements, whether it be Daesh, whether it be the YPG, or whether it be HTS or PKK, affect Turkey domestically. So they don't need an invitation from Bashar al-Assad. Turkey's more than within its international and legal rights to be inside Syria.
Dr. Bassam, I wonder what your opinion is on the Turkish involvement in Syria vis-a-vis the fight against YPG or otherwise.
Worked in Turkey for years, between 2004 as a diplomat until 2008. So I have a lot of Turkish friends, and I understand the Turkish policy. First of all, everyone knows that the Turkish foreign policy under Ahmed Davutoğlu was targeting to control, on behalf of the Muslim Brotherhood or Ottoman project, to control the region from North Africa to Syria. In Syria, this project is collapsed generally, and I think all documents which we can read about this foreign policy, and either this foreign policy was criticized from the opposition parties in Turkey itself. Now, this failed policy, I think now Turkey has changed a lot of its position. The last position was openly talked by Recep Tayyip Erdogan, the president of Turkey, when he said in the summit in Istanbul with Russia, France, and Germany that the Syrian people, they can decide the future of Syria. The Syrian people, they can decide the future of the president, because it's internal affairs of Syria, not internal affairs of Turkey. What is the role of Turkey? I think everyone knows. We have with Turkey about more than 900 kilometers. A lot of terrorists came from Turkey as a connection point, and there are a lot of documents, and either international and Western papers which talked about the Turkish role. Now the Turks discovered that if they will participate in or when they came to control Syria, they discovered that the Kurdish part is moving against them in the northeast of Syria, and now they are facing this danger. And because of that, I think we have a mutual cards. We have a mutual cards with Turkey. First of all, the danger of creation of Kurdish entity in the northeast of Syria. I think this is the danger for Syria, Iraq, Iran, and Turkey. And I think that Turkey is suffering from that. But at the same time, Turkish policy in the north of Syria, we are looking for the Turkish presence in the north of Syria as occupation, because they didn't take any kind of permission from Syrian government, which is the legal
But Dr.
government.
Bassam, if you allow me to come in, Dr. Bassam, Turkey would say, as Yusuf said, that Turkey needs to secure its border. It needs to be safe from terrorists who may come over from the border in Syria. So why does Turkey then not have a right to protect its own border?
I think if Turkey looking for that, they should coordinate with the Syrian government. There is no other option for Turkey. Either the coordination through Russia is not the sovereign state here. For the words of regime, I think this word should be changed, because in Syria there is Syrian government, Syrian Arab Republic, and which is recognized in the United Nations. At the same time, the Syrian consulate, general consulate, is working in Istanbul now. So I think the Turkish policy should be changed, and we notice that there is a change, but step by step, because the old policy is already failed, and Turkey should look for the future, because the danger on the borders between Syria and Turkey is a danger for Syria and for Turkey.
Okay, Dr. Bassam, let me just, I get your point, Dr. Bassam. I wanted to, if you allow me, Dr. Bassam, put that point to Yusuf, because Yusuf, I want to know how you would respond to that. Do you think, A, that the Turkish policy has, as it was in the past, failed, quote unquote, and do you think that Turkey now realizes that this Kurdish question on the border, that is something that unites it with even the Bashar al-Assad government?
First thing, whenever Turkey takes action in Syria, we can see that it's a multilateral decision, whether it be through the Astana process with Russia and Iran sitting down and taking the decision, or whether it be at the UN platform with the Geneva process. Turkey very rarely makes unilateral decisions in the region without discussing this with multiple partners. Now, as for the Kurdish question right now, the Afrin operation and a possible, and from the looks of it, a likely operation east of the Euphrates, despite Turkey opposing the Assad regime, is indirectly actually beneficial to the Assad regime. We've seen the YPG, or whatever you want to call them, the SDF. We've seen them taking steps towards autonomy, and this is something that's going to be a huge thorn in the side for Assad if he can save his political survival going forward. It's going to be a thorn in the side for him, and obviously U.S. troops in that region are going to be a thorn in the side for him. What Turkey wants is to handle this problem, clean the YPG from the area, and restore it back to its majority Sunni Arab population, which is in most of these regions, such as Raqqa and Deir ez-Zor. These are Sunni Arab regions. That's why the YPG is having such a problem with governance in these areas, and they're having uprisings. Now, as for past politics from the Davutoglu period, well, Davutoglu was less proactive in Syria. He wanted zero problems with the neighbors. But unfortunately, in an area as turbulent as the Middle East, you have to be proactive, and having zero problems with the neighbors is unfortunately an unrealistic goal. It's a very nice ideology to have, but the reality is there's so many players in the region with so many converging and diverging interests. It's hard to appease everybody, and you're going to have to take a stance. It's going to have to be Turkey first in some of these situations, and President Erdogan, there's been a shift in Turkey's foreign policy with President Erdogan and with Foreign Minister Mevlut Çavuşoğlu coming in over the last 4 or 5 years. And as we can see, it's been very, very successful. The new foreign policy is being implemented. Turkey was always backing the Arab Spring, but we saw whether it be in Egypt or whether it be areas that Saudi Arabia has backed, they've been against the Arab Spring and that ideology, and unfortunately, it's caused a rift between those countries and Turkey. But let's stay on the topic with Syria. I think what Turkey's doing right now is the correct strategy. They're trying to repatriate slowly and resettle these 3.5 million Syrians. But unfortunately, it's still dangerous in the area, and Turkey does not want to bring these refugees back until these areas are secure from terror, and they know that these people can provide them security and a livelihood.
Okay, Dr. Bassam, we have about a minute or so left, so I wanted to give you the final question, Dr. Bassam. Do you feel like, as Yusuf there mentioned, it does seem like a legitimate point, doesn't it, that what Turkey is doing or will do vis-a-vis the YPG is something that will actually benefit, even indirectly, the Bashar al-Assad government in that it will prevent or possibly create obstacles for the creation of an autonomous territory for the Kurds in Syria?
Yes.
Dr. Bassam, yes, go ahead.
Yes, please. Again, your question.
Sure. I just wanted to ask about if you think that Turkey's role right now, when it comes to the Syrian Kurds, is actually helpful for the Bashar al-Assad government.
I think the general situation now in Syria, I will explain to you two important things. First of all, the control of the Syrian government forces is more than 80% of the Syrian territory. The atmosphere in the Arab world is changing. The atmosphere in the international arena is changing. Most of the states generally believes that there is no military way in Syria. There is three important points: constitution, elections, and the future of Syria in the hands of the Syrians. This is the roadmap of the solution in Syria. So we should differ between two important things: between the national interests of every player in Syria, which including Turkey or Iran or Russia or United States or Israel, and the real interests of the Syrian people. Really. So the future, I think, we should look to helping the Syrian people to decide what they want exactly through free elections. But until now, there is big differences between what we can see in Damascus, the political solution, and what the Western states for political solution.
Okay.
Anyway, now I think we are going to the political war, which will replacing the military war. Because of that, we will see the war under the constitutional committee and under other targets. But generally, the war in Syria is going to the end, not now, maybe after 2 years, but Syria is feeling better and better, and I am talking from Damascus. The situation is better than before, and many states discovering that.
All right, Dr. Bassam, I apologize for interrupting you, but we'll have to leave that as our final comment. We, of course, appreciate you taking your time out, speaking to us live there from Damascus, Dr. Abu Abdullah, who is Professor of International Relations, and we're, of course, joined also by Yusuf Erim, journalist at TRT, who's speaking to us live from Istanbul. Yusuf, we appreciate your insight and your time as well. As both gentlemen there mentioned, there are, of course, a whole bunch of seemingly clashing national interests of all the players who are currently involved in the Syria quagmire. Who really is looking out for the Syrian people themselves is a question that remains unanswered to an extent at this point in time. We'll, of course, have to see how these U.S. observation posts actually play out on the ground, what effect they actually have, what the U.S. goal here actually is. We'll keep a very close eye on that. But thank you very much for watching. We'll be back after the short break with our next segment.